Russell, a friend of Sarah Ferguson, has revealed that she's on the cusp of a nervous breakdown as her daughters are being dragged into the scandal over her association with Jeffrey Epstein.
Sarah Ferguson didn't just run out of charm. She maxed it like a bad credit card, and the collector finally knocked on the door. The comeback Duchess, who could spin any scandal into a smile, now looks like a headline that won't stop bleeding. Stick with me, because you're about to learn the real timeline of her freefall, from the message that nuked her redemption arc to the PR scramble that made everything worse, how her daughters got yanked into the Epstein blast radius, why Royal Lodge turned from sanctuary into a museum of loss, how Andrew's hermit routine signals the end of the York myth, and the brutal reason the old "forgive Fergie" playbook is dead on arrival. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one in the palace will say out loud. The applause machine broke. For decades, Sarah lived on a loop: fall, cry, charm, reinvent, sell the comeback. It worked because the public likes a survivor, and the press loves a headline with a happy twist. But even the best magician runs out of tricks. This time, the audience stopped clapping. Not because the stunt was smaller, but because the stakes were higher. You can bounce back from toe-curling tabloid photos. You don't bounce back the same way from the shadow of Jeffrey Epstein. That stain doesn't fade, it spreads. Roll the tape back to the beginning of this collapse, because that's where the rot shows. Behind the gates of Royal Lodge, the routine used to be familiar. A charity talk here, a children's book there, a warm interview about family, resilience, gratitude. The message was always, I've learned, I've changed, I'm still here. But in private, the pressure didn't disappear. It multiplied. Bills, expectations, the constant need to be seen but not too seen, to be royal adjacent but never officially royal, to sell access to a name without looking like you're selling access to a name. That's a tightrope even professionals struggle to walk. Sarah danced on it for 30 years. Then came the message, the small, quiet thing that detonated like a bomb. An email, an olive branch, a nudge to smooth things over, a thank you that read like absolution. In a different world, it's barely a footnote. In this world, with this man, it's radioactive. When it surfaced, the illusion shattered. The Duchess, who built a brand on bouncebacks, suddenly looked like she was trying to launder proximity to the unforgivable. That wasn't just bad optics. It was a betrayal of the character she'd been selling the public for years. The mother, the philanthropist, the woman who learns. You can only hold those words if the receipts match. This time, the receipts torched the script. The fallout was immediate and merciless. Phones stopped ringing. Publishers who once courted her fell silent. Networks that happily booked her for wholesome features discovered scheduling conflicts that never cleared. A children's book, once the perfect halo project, drifted into delay and then into quiet. For a public figure built on visibility, the sudden darkness was deafening. The brand was no longer relatable resilience. The brand was, why are you still here? Inside Royal Lodge, the panic was operatic. Advisors reshuffled, statements were drafted and shredded, spin turned to smoke. The briefings were all the same. Contrition without confession, distance without denial, sincerity without specifics. But you can't A/B test your way out of a moral crater. The more the team tried to tidy the mess, the more it looked like a mess that would not be tidied. You could feel the tone of the coverage cool by the day, from too-tang to tired, from curious to contemptuous. And when the press gets bored of you, that's when they get cruel. What makes this collapse different isn't just the scandal. It's the collateral. The daughters, women who didn't choose the spotlight but were born into its crosshairs, found themselves pulled into the undertow. Not because of anything they did, but because scandal is a tide that drags the shoreline with it. Royal Lodge, once a place to hide from the headlines, became a place the headlines were now about. The corridors filled with boxes and the air with questions. What goes, what stays, who leaves, who remains to stare at the ghost of a life that doesn't exist anymore? Meanwhile, Andrew, the former prince, the man at the center of 1,000 erased honors, burrowed deeper into the bunker. Hours behind screens, days slipping by in silence, the future shrinking to the size of a room. He used to be a headline. Now he's a rumor. That's not a comeback. That's a vanishing act. And you can't build a family's redemption arc around a ghost. SOY, after decades of weathering storms, does this one feel final? Because every great reinvention story relies on 3 pillars: time, audience, and a clean break from the past. The time has run out, the audience is cooled, and the past won't let go. The old Fergie magic, tears, laughter, self-deprecation, lands like a rerun. It's not that people hate her, it's that they're tired. Tired of the same arc, tired of the same apologies, tired of watching someone sprint back into the fire they swore they'd leave behind. Here's the hinge moment you need to understand. For years, Sarah's public identity was built around the idea that the worst was behind her. That's the bargain every redemption story makes. We'll forgive, you'll grow, and we'll move forward together. But the minute the audience suspects the worst isn't behind you, that the worst is always waiting in the next inbox, the next acquaintance, the next favor, that bargain explodes. That's what happened here. The myth of finality died. Inside her circle, the language has changed. Friends don't just say she's stressed. They say she's unraveling. Not because a single headline broke her, but because the scaffolding that held her up, attention, invitation, opportunity, has collapsed at once. Sleepless nights. Regret spiraling into paranoia. Pacing the halls, replaying decisions as if the right edit could rewrite the past. Haunted not by ghosts, but by receipts. The email you shouldn't have sent, the alliance you shouldn't have trusted, the door you should have closed. And yet, there's a reason her story still grips us. It's messy, human, contradictory. She isn't a cartoon villain. She's a woman who learned to turn humiliation into a currency and then spent it until it bought her nothing. She is both sympathetic and exasperating, both resilient and reckless, both motherly and mercenary by turns. That's why the narrative refuses to die, because the truth is rarely tidy, and the public will always watch a tightrope walker, even when the rope is fraying. But let's be honest about the mechanics of power and image. Royal adjacent survival is a business model. To sustain it, you need three things: access, goodwill, and plausible deniability. Access opens doors to projects that pay. Goodwill keeps the press from slamming those doors shut. Plausible deniability lets you navigate messy acquaintances without sinking. The Epstein message obliterated the third, triggered the second to evaporate, and put the first on life support. Lose that triangle, and the empire of second chances collapses. The daughter's involvement marks the moral boundary. Beatrice and Eugenie have long been caught in the crossfire of their parents' choices, and the public has, at times, given them grace they refuse their elders. But every scandal has a point where innocence gets scorched by proximity. That's where the outrage comes from now, not just what Sarah did, but what her gravity does to everyone orbiting her. When the public starts to feel the daughters are being dragged across hot coals for the sins of their parents, sympathy shifts away from the Duchess and toward the next generation. And once sympathy moves, it rarely walks back. So, is this truly the end? Here's the paradox. The path back is narrower than it's ever been, but it isn't non-existent. There is a version of this story where Sarah doesn't try to charm her way out, doesn't try to sell us a prepackaged lesson, doesn't hide behind euphemism. The only version that survives the present moment is brutal honesty, accountability with specifics, a full stop on every relationship that compromises the mission she claims to live by, and a retreat from any project that smells like a shortcut to relevance. Not 12 talking points.